All right, just doing a quick little video this weekend, just doing a service on the Patrol. So I thought it'd be a cool little thing to just run through the basics to get that done. Got my brother-in-law Brian here helping out, and he's a diesel mechanic.
Yeah, diesel mechanic, yep.
Perfect guy to be helping out for the day.
Yeah.
And he's got nothing better to do other than help me sink beers and drop oil. I'll stage this up into different sections. So I'm going to do engine oil, we're going to do gearbox and transfer case, and we're also going to do a fuel filter today. So if you have a GQ Patrol, this will be relevant to you. All the oils, parts and bits I'm showing you today will be specific to a TD42 Patrol. If you don't have a Patrol or a TD42, it might still be relevant or helpful, but obviously there'll be different parts and things. So oil, I think it is the most common oil that people use for a TD42 GQ. So 15W40 from Castrol, it's just RX Super. You can look them up, find them super cheap, Repco. Spares box is a really good one that I go through. Oil filters for those, Z115. Obviously maybe poke under your bonnet and double check what you've got before you go and buy them, but that should be what it is. And we've got my fuel filter, which I'll be changing as well. And that's just a genuine Nissan filter. They tend to run a little bit better than the Riker ones for fuel filters, so stick with them. That's there. And I'll be doing gearbox and transfer oil also in this video, but I'll be showing the capacities and the oils for that in a different section. So once you've got the bonnet up on the Patrol, make sure you take your filler cap off on the top of the engine before you dump the oil out. Get a bucket underneath there to drop the oil into and start climbing your way under. To undo the sump plug on a TD42, you need a 22mm spanner, at least for the early models you do. This stuff's going to make a mess, so if you need to, clean up as you go. Now it's time to get the filters off. You've got two of these bad boys to undo, so get them out of there, and once you've done that, give the face of the block a bit of a clean up, and now you're ready to prep the new filters. So we've got two new engine filters here to go on, so what do you do every time you chuck a new one on there?
I always want to put a little bit of lube just on the seal there. Engine oil's fine, just a bit of clean engine oil, tipped out there. Otherwise a bit of rubber grease. It doesn't need to be much, just a little smear so it doesn't stick.
Beautiful.
That's all you need.
Time to get these new filters on. Some holiday for you, mate.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's alright. Obviously these don't need to be super tight. If you don't want to be using a filter strap for it, or you'll never undo them again.
Yeah, absolutely, been there. As Brian said here, you only want these on hand tight.
Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful, two freshies on. So something that I've never personally done, but should have done, and doing this time, new sump plug washer. So TD42, there's two different size plug washers that we've found out recently. Mine's an 92, but I think it falls into early model, so they've got a bigger diameter washer, and it's an M16. There is an M12 version on the newer versions, and also the GU TD42s use those as well. So we thought we were nearly going back for another trip to Super Cheap, didn't we? But we worked out. Lucky Brian to the rescue. I was trying to look at, I was looking up every listing under the sun, and it kept saying M12, and the bloke that does it for a living knew best. Once you have the copper washer on the sump plug, give the actual sump a good proper clean up before you back on there. Tighten it right up. Don't hang off it, but you want it fairly tight. Now it's time to start filling the engine with oil. The TD42 takes just under 11 litres. You can buy it in 20 litre drums, but there's also smaller bottle versions. What we found is easiest is to fill up a smaller bottle with 5 or 7 litres, and then do the same again to fill it up with the rest. Once you're confident you got the right amount in there, give everything a good tidy up, chuck the filler cap back on, and then start the engine over. You want to do this to make sure the oil circulates through the engine before you check the dipstick level. Once you're all done, it's a good idea just to give everything a once over and check if you haven't missed anything. Then it's time to dispose of the old oil. I use the old drums to fill it with the used engine oil, and there's usually places like Super Cheap Auto that will take your used oil, so no dumping it in the bush. And that's it, you're done doing the engine oil and filters for a TD42. Fuel filter. I like to do them every year, basically. What do you reckon, Brian?
40,000, but it depends what you're going to be going through. Filling up out in the bush a lot, every 20,000, worth checking.
Yep. Got a genuine filter here. So fuel filter is Nissan Group 16403-59EXM. This one looks like it's been beaten to shit, because it has. It's been sitting in the back of my car, rolling around just in case I need a spare, but it'll do. So we'll get that fella open. The far sight better than the Ryco ones. First thing you want to do is unplug your water sensor plug and then undo your bolts on the filter assembly. You'll have to get the inlet and outlet lines off. These might take a little bit of maneuvering to pop them off. Once they're off, undo the bolts on the actual block and you can take the whole assembly out. The filter is going to be full of diesel, so it's a good idea to undo the drain plug at the bottom of the water sensor and drain that into some sort of clear plastic bottle. You want to have a look at the fuel that's coming out and check it for any kinds of impurities and in particularly any water. Most replacement filters come with an O-ring for the bottom of the fuel filter, but it's a good idea to source the O-rings for the bottom of this drain plug as well. It's a good time to point out that we didn't have the seals to replace this. We cleaned it up as best as we possibly could with throttle and carby cleaner, but it wasn't good enough. I was having a few issues with the car afterwards until I properly replaced the seals. Once you have as much fuel out of the filter as you can possibly get, it's time to undo the rest of the assembly. Start with undoing the remainder of the filter drain, and then you have to take the filter off the block. Often these take a little bit more persuasion. You can maybe do them with your hands, but if you have a filter wrench or an old leather belt, that works pretty bloody good.
Make it work when you don't have the tools.
When you're putting the assembly back together, any seal or O-ring needs to be properly lubricated. Brian recommends rubber grease, but a bit of regular grease works just fine too.
Bit of a smear, doesn't need much.
Yeah.
Wipe. There's a bit of sediment in the fuel tank. That's all you need, just so it's not dry either.
Careful.
Hand tight. Same on that top seal, no dirt. Same thing, don't need much.
As I mentioned, we ended up having problems with the drain plug later down the line, but we tried to clean it up as much as we possibly could, greased up all the seals and whacked it in. With the full assembly back together, it's time to chuck it back in the car. When you're bolting the filter block back down, it's not a bad idea to chuck a little bit of anti-seize on the bolts as they go in, but some WD-40 or inox will do just as well. Tighten the block down properly, then put the inlet hose back on and the clamp back on. With most fuel filters, there'll be a directional arrow on the top of the block that points which way the fuel flows. Once you've done the inlet line, make sure you leave the outlet line back off so you can prime the fuel filter. Stretch up, it's time to prime the fuel filter, and this takes a bit of effort. It takes a few minutes of pumping to get the fuel into the filter, fill it all the way up before it starts coming out of the outlet. Once fuel's coming out of the outlet, it's time to chuck that line back on, put the clamp back on there. Once the fuel filter's full of fuel and the outlet line's back on, you still need to pump it a couple more times to get fuel through that line and all the way to the engine. Lastly, don't forget to plug your water sensor plug back in and clip it in behind your fuel filter. Right, that's engine oil and fuel filter done. Brian's been helping out for this set, but he's got to take off after this, and I'll be getting the gearbox done later, which you'll see shortly. So, thanks for your help, mate.
No troubles at all. Yeah, been good.
Could have
easy enough job.
Yeah, well, you taught me a couple of things. I normally do this myself, but you bloody nailed it. So
it's all straightforward. So yeah, easy enough to tackle yourself.
Cheers, bud. Righto, now we're tackling gearbox and transfer case today. For this one, we've got a bunch of nylon 75/90 to use. You could do the 85, hey?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, 85/90.
Sorry, 75/85 I think was the other
probably
option.
Probably either 80/90 or 75/90.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, some of them do say 75/85. It's just go by whatever the manufacturer says. But yeah, 80/90 or 75/90 for these.
So the gearbox takes just under 4 litres, 2 litres for the transfer case, or just under that as well. You can buy them in bigger bottles, but these little squeezy bottles work pretty bloody well. There's a bit of wastage that comes with them. You don't always get the full amount out of it, but you know, look, if you're in tight squeeze, you don't have a pump bottle or anything, they make it a lot easier to get up to the gearbox. There is other oil brands and types that you can use. I find the 75W90 works really well. I've been using it for the last many services I've been doing here, but I mean, if it works, don't change it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Alright, first thing, you want to find your drain plug for the gearbox. So that's underneath here, and then you've got your filler plug further up. Both of these for the TD42 gearbox are square drive, but some might be a hex. But the first thing is to undo your drain. Your drain and filler plug on your gearbox will take a standard 1/2-inch drive. A standard socket might do it, but you may need something with a little bit more leverage just to get those undone. There you go. Oh, she looks pretty good. The sun plug on the bottom of the gearbox will have a magnet on top of it, which will catch any metal shavings or worse. So it's always a good idea to inspect this before you properly clean it up. As that's dropping out the last few bits, top plug undone here. Sometimes a breaker bar might be a little bit better. For both the gearbox and the transfer case sump plug, you want to put some sort of thread sealant on the threads. You can use plumber's tape, but a good liquid thread sealant is the way to go. Make sure it's as clean as possible on the bottom, because then if you see oil later, you know it's come from there. So we'll get started with one of these. Time to fill up the gearbox with oil. Oh, it's dripping on my chin. Transfer case, so that's the filler plug at the back. Here's the drain plug. This one's 19mm, but I've just had Brian suggest to me that a decent sized shifter is probably better because it's less likely around it. It's a bit thicker edges and everything. So we'll get him down to 19. Where are we at? There we go. Alright, how's this one looking? A little browner, but still pretty clear. Could be doing a lot worse with this. And a bit of stuff on there, but not lots. Once the transfer case oil's dropped, it's the same recipe as the gearbox. Undo the top plug, clean everything up, and then start filling. Don't forget to clean up the sump plug, put some thread sealant on it, and get it back in there before you start filling with oil. The sump plugs for both the gearbox and the transfer case are tapered thread, so they get increasingly tighter as you tighten them up. You don't want to incredibly over tighten on these, but you want to get them as tight as you possibly can with a standard size socket or spanner. Give everything a good wipe down to make sure that there's no oil left over in the surrounding areas, and it's not a bad idea if you have the bigger spanner to just give it a little nip up as well. Time to fill the transfer case in the same way we did the gearbox. The gearbox takes 4 litres as we mentioned earlier, and the transfer case just takes 2. For both the gearbox and transfer case, you'll know when it's full when it starts pouring out of the filler plug, but if you want to be really sure, you can put your finger in there and just make sure that you can feel oil. Tighten everything up, clean everything down, and then you're done. So that's about it. The whole thing, we've done engine oil and filters, done fuel filter, we've also done gearbox oil and transfer case oil. This is just a very basic run through. As you would have seen, I've only just told you the basics, the amounts, just showing you where to undo things. There's much more comprehensive videos out there to check out, but this is just to give you the basics. Specifically for a TD42 GQ Patrol, this will apply to other patrols as well, especially TD42 ones, but mostly specific to this. But you can also take the same principles from other vehicles. While you're doing this, there's a couple other things you can check over while you're doing it.
Just have a look underneath, run your eyes over it. Yeah, I'll probably end up doing a grease as well at some point of the uni joints.
Get a grease gun and a tube of grease from Super Cheap or something.
Yep, that's all that needs. Another basic job to do. If you find anything else wrong, you can obviously tend to that if it's within your capabilities. Yeah, get on top of any issues before they become a real issue as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going off for a trip in a week's time, and then another one in another couple of weeks' time, so I'm very happy to have this thing all serviced. We'll catch you in the next video.